Hi, it's me again with Corel Dual Tips and Tricks. I actually think this is part 3. I started thinking about if you were going to do this and all this work, and this would be a file that you could just use for anybody's name. Well, you change the date. I didn't put the date in there like this one, but that would be very easy. We could add a little flair to this, what I call, and make this a little better. Because if we take, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set my nudge factor on like 5 inches. I'm going to nudge everything out of the way I don't need. And I don't like to nudge where I have to multiple nudge. So let's make it 20 inches. And I'm going to nudge this out of the way. Because a lot of times you don't really know how the weld key is going to react. So what we're going to do, and that's another reason to do this. Matter of fact, let's nudge this all the way out of the way. And let's make a duplicate of that. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to weld it. And that's exactly what we want, okay? And I'm using a different font than I was yesterday. But in some fonts, it might be a little hard to read. So we could do this right here. And I didn't practice this. That's not what I want. That's not what I want. So a lot of times when it just doesn't work, you're going to have to do this right here. And this is just going to give it a little bit of flair. I'm going to take well, first of all, this is, okay, it's not a text. I've already converted it to a curve because you can't cut a text. And if we cut this, all we have are these, let's make sure we get it all. So everything below the line is going to be a cut line, or anything above the line is going to be a cut line like right here. But if we take this now and nudge it back over and make it something larger than a hairline, and then you bring in so that would be your file. Well, this should still be your file. And this would be your file that you would keep. And because you're engraving this, that black line is going to engrave and going to make it a little bit easier to read, not particularly on this font. But if you could imagine, well, let's just nudge this out of the way for a second. And if you know what, I'm going to have to smart fill it since I've already, well, you know what? I'm going to just nudge this out of the way. So let's make this thing the color of wood, or somewhat close to the color of wood. Trying to change. And if you're an engraver, you're going to use RGB. So let's say it's going to be this color of wood. That's what it's going to look like. And I'm actually going to take away the outline. That's what it's going to look like. But if we take this and go up to Object, Order, Front of Page, those little bitty lines are going to make the text maybe a little more readable. And then, of course, you could take your Maxwell. So that would be your file. And then you would use, well, your file would actually just be cut lines. But you could use this over and over and over and over when people get married, and then just add their name with that same font. And because you're going to engrave it, so this is going to engrave, that's going to engrave, and that's going to engrave. And I would engrave it first and then cut it out. And let's do it without the fill. So that's the way it's going to look. And it's way too, part 2, we put the hook hanger on it. So I'm going to make it a little smaller. So let's say you put it in your laser. And if you have a combo job, it's going to engrave it first anyway. And, well, I'm going to say most lasers. Like, I know all epilogue lasers have a combo job where it'll engrave first and then cut out. But what's so neat about this, and once you put the date, let's see how big this thing is. you would make an ornament that big, but we'll just say it's 8 inches. And if you made a duplicate of this and you had multiple people, you could just take this and change it to green. Of course, it's shorter, so you have to put it in the center of the page. And you could actually, on this particular case, make it bigger or whatever you wanted to do. So you could make multiple, you're not going to have that many people buying or giving people that get married and give it to them for their first Christmas. But that's going to add quite a bit of blame, trust me. Not particularly on that font. I used a different font today than I did yesterday because it's an interior cut and the chances of it breaking aren't very, if you had it on the top, you could break it. Anyway, hope that just gave you another idea, and thank you for watching.